Could I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Guzman,
Present.
Alderman Donnerworth, Alderman Hayes,
Present.
Alderman Florian,
Present.
Alderman Newsom.
We do have a quorum, I believe, even though there's not a lot of us here. Can I get a first and a second to approve the minutes from the last finance meeting?
First. Second.
Thank you. Any questions?
None for me.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next item on the agenda, item D, public comments. Is there anyone here who would like to address the committee? Mr. Kapheim, please approach the podium, and don't touch the microphone. It works just in the position it's in. Thank you.
Specifically, this is connected to item D, the $42,000 for the art grant. But most importantly, it's about the spirit of that art grant in the first place. The state of Illinois issued this grant with the understanding that you're to use that money for the creative effort of artists to create art for the city downtown, Waukegan, and that is specifically outlined in item A in the original grant proposal. So that's not yours, but theirs. They said what they want. I was on the committee for that, and still am, I think. And I entered both the mural and the competition for the Waukegan Identity Sculpture. Now let me explain what a sculpture is. If I mention the city of New York, if I said the Statue of Liberty, what city are we talking about? New York. If I said a big silver beam, what city are we talking about? And if you're old like me, if you saw Picasso in Daly Center, what would you think of? Chicago, too, right? That's an identity sculpture. That's what that means. It doesn't mean spelling out the word Waukegan. So, as I said, I entered that competition. I withdrew from the committee for that, which is the right thing to do. We don't want a conflict of interest. But before we got there, a lot of discussion took place. I mean, a serious amount of discussion. This has been going on for over a year, by the way. In that discussion, it was clearly decided that it wasn't just about letters. It was about sculpture that had letters in it. The letters that they proposed were WAUK, W-A-U-K, W-G-K-N, I believe was the other one, or whatever, and Waukegan itself. Now, what is the prominent idea from the state of Illinois? It's art. It's not to make a glorified signage for Waukegan. Now, I followed that in good faith, and I entered that competition. I'm told there's about 17 other people who entered. I think they all were deceived. They were deceived if they were under the thinking that it was sculpture. And I think the state of Illinois was deceived by thinking that it's sculpture. When that word was inserted, I believe it was done to let people know that the people in the state of Illinois, that they expect to see sculpture here, not letters, not signage. So my understanding is that committee submitted the things to the group that was going to make the judgment, and their judgment was, the whole thing was tabled, stopped cold, because someone in administration, or perhaps the whole administration, said, no, we want letters and only letters. That's a miscarriage.
Thank you, sir.
Of the art. Excuse me?
Your 3 minutes
You only
is up.
get 3 minutes.
Oh, nobody told me. Well, I'd like to talk to it when it comes up in the meeting then.
You
Is
can.
that possible?
Yeah, you can sign up in front. There's a sign-in sheet, sir.
What?
There's a sign-in
There's
sheet
a
up
sign-up
front.
sheet on the door for the 7 o'clock meeting.
7 o'clock meeting. I thought this meeting. Can I speak to it when it comes up in your, when you debate it, when you debate it on the agenda?
No, not until we do it in the next meeting, sorry.
Well, I hope you table it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to address the committee? Okay, We'll move on. Under new business, item A, can I get a first and a second for a resolution approving the acceptance of a grant from the Bureau of Justice Assistance Patrick Leahy Bulletproof Vest Partnership?
I so move.
Second.
Are there any questions to this motion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman,
Yeah, aye.
Hayes,
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. Item B, can I get a first and a second for a resolution approving and authorizing the proper city officials to renew professional services agreement with Nicole Large per section 2-458 subsection I-5 professional services for professional consulting services regarding researching, writing, and management of local, state, and federal grant funding and opportunities?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions to this motion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman,
Aye.
Alderman Hayes,
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye. Thank you. That item passes. Item C, I need a first and a second for a resolution approving a partnership agreement with the Brushwood Center regarding an Environmental Protection Agency Community Change Grant.
So move.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions to that motion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman,
Aye.
Alderman Hayes,
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye. Thank you. That motion passes as well. Item D, can I get a first and a second for a resolution approving a professional services agreement for a public art installation in the amount of $42,000?
So move.
Second.
Are there any questions to this motion?
I do. Okay, the gentleman just came up here and spoke to about sculpture, that the grant was supposed to be specified. And I understand what he was trying to do, that when he was saying different cities. So the iconic thing is the sculpture defines the city, and then everybody knows where that city is allocated at, like the being with Chicago, Statue of Liberty with New York. So is this grant supposed to be that way? Because the way I was told, it was supposed to be like art on a wall.
Well, the grant has different allocations of money. So this particular allocation is for a wall mural. He's speaking of another part of the grant that is going to go for a sculpture. Is there someone that would like to speak to this, Rachel, or?
Good evening. Yes. So the agenda item before you is specifically for the wall art portion of this grant. So this grant, we were allocated $400,000 for public art and streetscape improvements in downtown Waukegan. So $160,000 were allocated towards wall art. So the one that you have before you is kind of the first one that has been awarded. We're still working through the submissions and the locations that we have. Some of these are private owners, so we have to kind of work with them to make sure that, you know, we're not going to put a mural that they hate on their wall. So not all the submissions have been awarded. No one's been denied yet, but this is just the first one that has been awarded. The sculpture itself is a different part of that grant. We have 125 allocated towards that part of the grant. We referred to it as a sculpture because that's what it is, but in our grant application, we specifically stated that it was going to be a giant letter sculpture. So giant letters spelling out Waukegan, or WAUK, WKGN, variations of that like you see in a lot of famous cities like Toronto, Cleveland, Amsterdam, places like that. So that was the intention behind that other portion. But again, the one that you have in front of you is for the wall art portion.
And art is beyond me. I'm a science person. So 42,000 for a wall mural versus 125,000 for a sculpture. Is that, apples to apples? Like, is that fair?
so
Like the amount of work that goes into each of those things?
Yeah, so the sculpture itself is going to be significantly larger than just a wall painting. So the one that you have before you specifically is paint on brick, but the wall art was open to not just, painting on a wall, but, mosaics, 3D relief, projections, even other things that could be art on a wall. The sculpture itself is going to be typically, we're going to see that made out of bronze or fiberglass or some other large expensive material. So that's why we had more money allocated towards this sculpture. It's also anticipated to be very large, no larger than 8 feet tall, but looking at, 5 to 8 in height.
I was almost thinking there wasn't enough allocated for the sculpture, actually, if it's 42,000 to paint a wall, but I hear you.
Well, that's
Alderman?
not for today, so I guess we can move forward with this then. That's another
Any other
day's issue.
questions?
No.
No questions, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye. Item E, can I get, motion passes, by the way. Item E, a resolution approving the procurement of a generator and installation services for fire stations number 1 and number 5. So it's actually for 2 generators, it's not 1. For an amount not to exceed $113,880. Can I get a first and a second for that?
So move.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions to this motion?
I do. Do you have the fire chief up here?
He's coming.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chief. Okay, my question is this. I saw the number. I know it seems like a big number, but these generators, especially for these fire stations, must work. And to be honest with you, it seemed a little low to me for 2 generators that are going to supply power and just in case for an emergency for 2 different stations. Are we positive that this is going to hold up to our standard and not kaput on us?
Yes, sir. We had 2 different vendors come out. Both were Sourcewell vendors, and they both came up with the same kilowatts per hour that we would need for these generators at the stations. So one was about $150,000 for the 2 of them, and the other was $113,000, which is the one that we put forward.
Okay, sounds great. I was just making sure. The number seemed a little low. I know the house generators, but I want to make sure these fire stations are going to be up and running.
And we don't power everything in the fire station. We have select outlets and select things that we do use with the generators, so not everything.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And just as a note, this isn't a waiver of competitive bidding. Sourcewell is a joint purchasing collective, which the city has access to, so they do basically competitive bid these items of equipment out nationwide to get the best price.
Yeah, I was just worried about that. It was make sure it's going to hold up to the fire station standards. To make sure they're going to have power and everything's going to move smooth
Yes,
sailing.
sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief. Roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye. Item passes. Thank you. Item F, a resolution waiving competitive bidding and improving an agreement with Seagrave Fire Apparatus LLC for the refurbishment of a rescue squad apparatus in an amount not to exceed $273,166.89. Can I get a first and a second?
So move.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions to this motion? Okay, roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye. Item passes. Thank you. Item G, a resolution approving a lease agreement with Ballard Marine Construction LLC for a portion of the water plant parking lot property. Can I get a first and a second?
First.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions to this motion? Okay, roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye, item passes. Thank you, gentlemen. Item H, amendments to the special events provisions and fees of City Code of Ordinances. Can I get a first and a second?
First.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions to this motion?
Nothing from me.
I didn't quite understand it.
Attorney Stu will explain.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
I didn't quite understand it because there were so many things on the whole thing when I was asking the.
So thank you for that lead-in, because there were, as Alderman Guzman noted, there are a number of things that are changing on this. And we have a presentation, it's very brief, but it basically, what we've done is we've tried to clarify and modernize certain sections of the special event permit. And I note this is only for discussion tonight this is for only on committee. It is not on the city council agenda. So, if there's comments, from any of the aldermen, please, we're happy to discuss this. Also, we have Itzel and Manelli here from the licensing division who work on these types of these permits as well. So if we can go to the next slide. So the proposal, as I said, is to amend various sections of the Code of Ordinances to clarify and modernize special events. We've added some defined terms. The ordinance as it was had a lot of terms that just weren't defined, which is always a problem. We clearly state that special events are approved on a first-come, first-served basis for a location. You'd think that would be something that had been in the code. It was not. Based on staff's request, we are extending the application review period to 90 days. We're also simplifying the fee structure. Previously, it was cheaper if you got it in by 90 days, and then it got more expensive. Now it's one fee. You get your application in within 90 days, or 90 days before the event. Appeals of denials, as you will recall, last year around the, not this past summer, but the summer before, there was a special event permit that was denied that then came to the city council for appeal. And there was a lot of reaction from the members of the city council asking why this was coming to them and why we were basically making a political issue out of this. So now we're changing this, that appeals of denials will be heard by the city's administrative hearing officer. If you don't like what the hearing officer has decided, then you can take that to circuit court. I'm not being facetious, that's actually the process. It's a process for appealing a code decision by almost any code official of the city. As I said, we're simplifying the fee structure. And then we're also requiring a submission of an emergency action plan for security, medical responses, and fire safety. Not every special event is going to require this, but for larger special events, there wasn't this requirement, and it was definitely something that we had heard from the fire chief and the police chief that they wanted this codified. Further, we exempt certain events protected by the First Amendment, spontaneous gatherings and demonstrations. We don't want to we wouldn't want to try and shut down events that happen spontaneously that do not otherwise take up the public right of way. We'll discuss what those are in a second. And then also having a requirement that for larger events, permittees are required to participate in a post-event evaluation with city staff if it's something that is going to recur in subsequent years. If we could go to the next slide. So we've clarified the definitions of special events, and we've clarified what city services are, because a special event is something that takes up city services. We've defined what it is to impact city services. And we've also added in what is called the provisional permit. This reflects the actual practice that the city has had for a number of years, where applicants would come in, fulfill all the application requirements, pay the fee, but still had to deliver certain items within a certain amount of time before the event. And so rather than saying that the special event has not been granted because not every single item is in, you don't have all of your vendors in, that was never a requirement, that there is a provisional permit. That provisional permit basically would hold the date but allow the applicant to keep working with staff. If we can move on to the next slide. As I mentioned with appeals would now, instead of going to the city council, would go to the city's administrative hearing officer. The person denied would have a chance to present their case. They would get a hearing. And then if the denial was upheld, they could take that to circuit court pursuant to the administrative review law. Exempt events. These are events that do not require a permit. Government events, whether it be by the federal government, the state, the county, the park district, or the city itself, those are determined to be events that do not require a special event permit. Events on private property that do not impact traffic or parking on public property. So this has been part of our code for a long time. But if you have an event that is completely contained on private property and is not going to overspill with regard to parking or traffic, that does not require a special event permit. I would note that there are some completely private special events that still have to get a permit from the city if you're getting a temporary liquor license. That's separate from this, though. All right, and then finally, spontaneous events. As we know, there are events that happen in the community where there are assemblies or processions, protests. So long as those remain either on the sidewalk or on city property but do not impede traffic or pedestrian flows, those do not require a special event permit. And that's basically to protect us from First Amendment claims. That's a summary of it, and there was a sample of the amendments that was on board docs. Do you have any questions specifically about any of the things that were on the presentation?
So this is just for discussion. Some of the stuff is okay, some of the stuff I don't like, but this is just for discussion, correct?
Well, it is on for committee today. It is not on the city council. So if you want further discussion, if you want to amend something, and I can provide you with the full copy of the ordinance if you don't have that.
Well, I'm going to put a motion to hold, so I can go through the whole thing, because...
Hold it over in committee, or, I mean, it's not on the council agenda, so you have 2 weeks to talk about anything you need to talk about before it shows up on the city council agenda. Do you need more than 2 weeks?
No, that should do it.
Okay, so we can pass it through committee, and you have 2 weeks to discuss it, and then we can review it.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes. Aye. Alderman Florian.
Aye, thank you, gentlemen. Okay, so item I, a motion to authorize staff to pay the annual Visit Lake County Partnership contribution in the amount of $35,830. Can I get a first and second?
So move.
Second.
Any questions to this motion? Okay, roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye, thank you, gentlemen. That motion passes. Item J, I need a first and a second motion to go into closed executive session to discuss imminent litigation pursuant to Section 2, subsection C11 of the Open Meetings Act.
I so move.
Second.
Do we need to actually vote on that then?
Yes, roll call vote, please.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Guzman.
Aye.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Please, after you, sir. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so now we need a motion and a second to come back into regular session for finance and purchasing at 5:54.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So item 3 is reports and communication. Everyone got a summary of the reports. Is there any questions about any of the monthly reports? Okay. So adjourn. I need a first and a second motion to adjourn the meeting at 5:54.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We will go into Public Works in 2 minutes.